Ma'am, open this door right now or we'll make this difficult. The pounding rattled the thin apartment door hard enough to shake the loose picture frames hanging above Naomi Carter's kitchen table. At 5:12 in the morning, the hallway outside her unit flashed red and blue through the frosted glass window beside the stairwell, washing the peeling beige walls in cold color that made the building feel less like home and more like a crime scene. Naomi stood perfectly still in the middle of her tiny living room, one hand wrapped around her phone, the other pressed gently against her daughter's shoulder. 8-year-old Mia sat curled beneath a faded blanket on the couch, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest so tightly its stitched ear bent sideways. Another knock slammed through the apartment. Louder this time. Sharper. "Federal officers," a man barked from outside. "Open the door." Naomi inhaled slowly through her nose. Calm. Measured. The way her grandmother taught her years ago when fear tried to climb into her throat. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 5:13 in soft green numbers. The smell of coffee from the automatic brewer she'd set the night before drifted faintly through the room, warm and ordinary against the chaos gathering outside her door. Mia looked up at her with glassy eyes. "Mom," she whispered. Naomi crouched beside her immediately. "Hey," she said softly, brushing a loose curl away from Mia's forehead. "Look at me, baby." Another bang rattled the hinges. Somewhere farther down the hallway, a neighbor's door cracked open. Naomi could hear muffled whispers now. Phones unlocking. Footsteps shifting on old carpet. Curiosity spreading faster than fear. "Everything's okay," Naomi told her daughter, though her own pulse had started thudding beneath her ribs like distant drums. Outside, a police radio crackled sharply. Male voices overlapped. Boots scraped concrete. Naomi rose slowly and stepped toward the door, careful, controlled, refusing to rush simply because someone demanded it. Through the peephole, she saw 3 icy officers standing beneath the flickering hallway light. Thick jackets, tactical vests, black gloves. One white officer stood front and center with a rigid posture that felt almost rehearsed. Officer Daniel Reeves. His expression looked carved from stone. No anger, no warmth either. Just authority worn like armor. The hallway behind him glowed with rotating emergency lights from the SUVs parked outside the apartment complex. Rain dripped from the shoulders of his jacket onto the stained carpet below. "Miss Carter," Reeves called out. "We need to speak with you." Naomi unlocked the deadbolt but kept the chain latched. The door opened barely 3 inches. Cold hallway air slipped inside immediately. "Can I help you?" she asked calmly. Reeves studied her face for a second too long before answering. His eyes flicked past her shoulder into the apartment like he expected guilt to be sitting at the kitchen table. "We received information connected to this address," he said. "Open the door fully." Naomi didn't move. "Do you have a judicial warrant?" For the first time, something shifted in Reeves's expression. Small. Brief. But there. Surprise. Behind him, a younger officer glanced sideways. Another officer adjusted the body cam attached to his vest, its red recording light blinking steadily in the dim hallway. Reeves exhaled through his nose. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "don't start making this harder than it needs to be." Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the door. The hallway had gone strangely quiet now. Even the whispers behind neighboring doors seemed to stop. Somewhere downstairs, thunder rolled low across the city. Then Mia's small voice floated softly from the couch behind Naomi. "Mom, who are they?" Reeves heard it. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Naomi didn't take her eyes off him, and neither of them blinked. The silence stretched so long that even the buzzing hallway light outside seemed louder than before. Officer Daniel Reeves kept one gloved hand resting near the edge of the half-open door, while rainwater dripped steadily from his sleeve onto the carpet below. Naomi Carter stood her ground without raising her voice, but her heartbeat had started pressing harder against her ribs now, deep and heavy like footsteps inside an empty church. Behind her, Mia slowly climbed off the couch, the stuffed rabbit still tucked beneath her arm. The little girl's pink socks barely made a sound against the worn hardwood floor as she moved closer to her mother. Reeves noticed immediately. His eyes flicked downward for half a second before returning to Naomi's face. "We are not here to cause a scene," he said. "Then stop acting like one," Naomi replied quietly. The younger officer standing behind Reeves shifted awkwardly at that. His badge read Tyler Brooks. Mid-20s maybe. Clean cut. Nervous eyes. The kind of face that had not learned yet how to hide uncertainty. Reeves ignored him. "Ma'am, we have authority to investigate this location." Naomi did not blink. Authority is not the same thing as permission. Somewhere down the hallway, a phone camera lifted higher behind a barely opened apartment door. Tiny reflections from the screen shimmered against the dim hallway walls. Naomi saw it. So did Reeves. The muscles in his jaw flexed once. "You are obstructing a federal inquiry," he said carefully, each word clipped and deliberate. "No," Naomi answered. "I am asking whether you have a judicial warrant signed by a judge." The cold morning air drifting through the doorway carried the smell of wet asphalt and engine exhaust from the parking lot below. One of the icy SUVs idled outside with headlights cutting pale white streaks across the rain-soaked pavement. The entire apartment complex felt awake now. Listening. Waiting. Mia reached for Naomi's hand and squeezed it tightly. Naomi glanced down at her daughter for only a moment before looking back at Reeves. "You are scaring my child," she said. Reeves finally pulled a folded document from the inside pocket of his jacket. He held it up briefly but not close enough for her to read. "We have documentation." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Then let me see it." Another pause. Longer this time. Tyler Brooks looked toward Reeves carefully. "Sir." Reeves cut him off with a glance sharp enough to silence him instantly. Naomi noticed that too. Every small hesitation. Every crack forming beneath the officer's controlled posture. She had seen men like Reeves before. Men who believed. Confidence alone could replace procedure. "Open the door fully," Reeves repeated. "No," Naomi said calmly. The word landed softly but seemed to freeze the hallway harder than shouting would have. A television somewhere in another apartment suddenly lowered in volume. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. Reeves stared at Naomi as if waiting for fear to finally appear on her face. It never did. Instead, she folded her arms slowly across her chest. Not defensive, not aggressive, simply steady. "If you have a judicial warrant," she said, "slide it under the chain." Tyler swallowed visibly. Reeves remained motionless for several seconds. Rain hammered harder outside now, tapping against stairwell windows and metal railings like restless fingers. Then Mia's quiet voice broke the silence again. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Naomi looked down at her daughter, and something in her expression softened instantly. Warmth replacing steel for just a second. "No, baby," she whispered gently. "We are just making sure people follow the law." And standing in the hallway beneath the flashing red and blue lights, Tyler Brooks lowered his eyes toward the folded paper in Reeves's hand for the very first time. Tyler Brooks stared at the folded warrant in Daniel Reeves's hand like he was seeing it differently now, not as paperwork but as something heavier. Something dangerous. The blinking red light on the body cam attached to the older officer's chest reflected faintly against the apartment door chain, pulsing every few seconds in the dim hallway like a silent countdown. Naomi Carter remained standing in the narrow doorway without moving an inch. Her apartment behind her looked painfully ordinary under the soft kitchen light. A half-packed lunchbox sat beside the sink. A child's math workbook lay open on the coffee table. The television screen reflected pale blue static because Mia had muted the cartoons the moment the knocking started. It did not look like the home of someone dangerous. It looked like the home of someone tired. Reeves finally unfolded the document halfway, but he still did not slide it forward. "This investigation concerns an individual connected to this address," he said. "Then say their name," Naomi replied immediately. Reeves hesitated. Tiny. Almost invisible. But enough. Naomi caught it. Tyler caught it too. Down the hall, another apartment door creaked open wider. Mrs. Evelyn Ross, the elderly woman from Unit 4C, stepped into the hallway wearing a long gray robe and fuzzy slippers. Her silver curls were wrapped in a satin scarf, and she held her phone low near her chest, pretending not to record while very clearly recording. "Everything all right out here?" she asked carefully. Reeves did not turn around. "Ma'am, please return to your apartment." Mrs. Ross narrowed her eyes. "I asked the young lady if she was all right." The hallway fell quiet again. Naomi felt Mia's fingers tighten around her hand. The little girl pressed herself closer against her mother's side now, hiding halfway behind Naomi's leg while staring at the officers with wide, uncertain eyes. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Reeves exhaled slowly through his nose before finally holding the warrant closer to the opening in the door. Naomi leaned forward slightly, careful not to break the chain lock. Her eyes moved quickly across the document. Address. Unit number. County seal. Then she stopped. A cold stillness passed across her face. "This is not signed by a judge," she said quietly. Reeves's expression hardened instantly. "Federal authorization is sufficient." Naomi looked directly at him. "No, it is not." Somewhere near the stairwell somebody whispered, "She knows her rights." Another phone appeared above a railing downstairs. Tyler looked at the warrant himself now, his brows pulling together slightly. Naomi continued speaking calmly, almost softly, but every word landed heavier than the last. "This is an administrative warrant." She looked up at Reeves again. "You cannot force entry into my home with this." Reeves's jaw flexed. "Ma'am, I strongly advise cooperation." Naomi did not raise her voice, did not step back, did not flinch. "And I strongly advise you understand the difference between intimidation and legal authority." The sentence hit the hallway like a sudden drop in temperature. Even the rain outside seemed quieter for a moment. Reeves glanced toward the neighbors watching from cracked doors and stairwell railings. More phones now. More eyes. His control over the situation was beginning to slip, and everybody could feel it. Tyler cleared his throat carefully. "Sir." Reeves shot him a warning look sharp enough to stop him cold. But the younger officer's uncertainty was already visible now. Naomi saw it spreading through the hallway like light under a closed door. Then Mia looked up at her mother and asked in the smallest voice yet, "Why are they acting like you did something wrong?" Naomi lowered her eyes toward her daughter, and for the first time that morning, pain flickered across her face before she covered it again with calm. She brushed her thumb gently across Mia's knuckles and answered softly enough that only the hallway listening in complete silence could hear it. "Sometimes people decide who looks suspicious before they ever learn the truth." The hallway air felt heavier now, thick with tension and wet concrete drifting in every time the stairwell door downstairs opened. Naomi Carter could feel the entire apartment building listening. Not speaking, just listening. The old pipes inside the walls hummed softly. Rainwater rattled against metal gutters outside. Somewhere below, a car alarm chirped once before cutting off abruptly, as if even the city itself had paused to watch what happened next. Daniel Reeves folded the administrative warrant slowly and slipped it back inside his jacket without breaking eye contact with Naomi. The movement alone told everybody in the hallway what they needed to know. He had expected compliance. Fear. Panic maybe. Not resistance wrapped in calm certainty. Naomi remained behind the chain door, shoulders relaxed, voice steady, but inside her chest her pulse beat hard enough to make her fingertips cold. Mia stayed pressed against her side silently now, eyes moving between the officers and the neighbors gathering farther down the hall. Tyler Brooks glanced toward the watching residents again. More phones had appeared. A teenage boy in a hoodie leaned halfway over the second-floor railing recording openly now. Mrs. Evelyn Ross lowered her phone only long enough to whisper toward another neighbor, "Do not stop filming." Reeves heard that too. His expression tightened another degree. "You are making this public when it does not need to be," he said sharply toward Naomi. She blinked once. "You made it public when you showed up with flashing lights before sunrise." The younger officer swallowed visibly. Reeves shifted his weight slightly, rainwater creaking beneath his boots against the old carpet. "People like you always try to turn procedure into persecution," he muttered under his breath. The moment the sentence left his mouth, the hallway changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like oxygen suddenly disappearing from a room. Tyler looked up immediately. Mrs. Ross stopped pretending not to record. Even the teenager above the stairwell lowered his phone for a second in disbelief before raising it again. Naomi stared at Reeves silently. Her face did not twist in anger. That almost made it worse. "People like me?" she asked quietly. Reeves realized too late what he had said aloud. "That is not what I meant." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "No. Red and blue emergency lights swept across the hallway walls again, briefly painting everyone in cold color before fading. Tyler shifted uncomfortably beside his supervisor. "Sir," he said carefully, "maybe we should step back and verify the documentation first." Reeves ignored him completely. "Miss Carter," he said firmly, trying to regain control, "we received a report connected to this apartment involving undocumented activity." Naomi let out the smallest breath through her nose. Not laughter. Something sadder. "Undocumented activity," she repeated softly. "You mean me helping immigrant families understand housing paperwork?" Reeves's eyes narrowed. "We are not discussing your community involvement." "That is exactly what this is about," Naomi replied. The hallway stayed silent enough to hear water dripping steadily from Reeves's jacket sleeve onto the carpet below. One drop. Then another. Then another. Naomi looked at the officers one by one before speaking again. 3 weeks ago I helped a tenant file a complaint after an illegal eviction threat. Tyler looked confused now. Reeves remained motionless. Naomi continued calmly. 2 days later somebody reported suspicious activity connected to my address. Mrs. Ross's expression hardened instantly. "Oh, that is dirty," she whispered under her breath. Reeves finally raised his voice slightly. "You are making assumptions." Naomi's eyes stayed locked on his. "No," she said softly. "I learned a long time ago what it looks like when authority shows up already convinced you are guilty." Mia looked up at her mother then, confusion clouding her small face. "Mom," she whispered carefully, "did they come because you helped people?" Naomi looked down at her daughter, and for one painful second, her composure almost cracked. She brushed a trembling hand gently against Mia's curls and answered quietly enough that the entire hallway leaned in to hear it. "Sometimes helping the wrong people makes certain powerful people uncomfortable." And standing beside his supervisor beneath the flashing hallway lights, Tyler Brooks slowly reached for the folded warrant in Reeves's jacket pocket himself. Tyler Brooks's fingers brushed the edge of the folded warrant inside Daniel Reeves's jacket pocket before the older officer immediately stepped back and blocked him with a sharp movement of his arm. Not violent. Just fast enough to make the younger man freeze. The hallway lights flickered once overhead, buzzing softly above the growing silence. Naomi Carter watched the exchange carefully from behind the chain door, her expression calm but alert now, like someone recognizing cracks forming beneath a wall built to intimidate her. Rain still rolled steadily outside, streaking down the stairwell windows in silver lines. Somewhere in the parking lot below, one of the ICE SUV engines shut off with a low mechanical hum that left the entire building feeling suddenly quieter. Too quiet. Tyler lowered his hand slowly. "Sir," he said cautiously, "if the paperwork is incomplete, we should verify before proceeding." Reeves kept his eyes locked on Naomi. "The situation is under control." "Does not feel like it," Mrs. Evelyn Ross muttered loud enough for half the hallway to hear. A few nervous chuckles followed from neighboring doors before disappearing just as quickly. Reeves turned slightly toward the watching residents. Everybody needs to step back inside their apartments. Nobody moved. Phones remained raised. Naomi noticed the reflection of livestream comments rolling upward on one teenager's screen near the stairwell. Hundreds now. Maybe more. Tiny glowing messages climbing rapidly through the darkness. Somebody downstairs whispered, "This is all over the internet already." Reeves heard that too. His face tightened another fraction. Then Naomi finally spoke again. "Who reported this address?" Reeves answered instantly, "That information is confidential." "Convenient," Naomi replied softly. Tyler looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time since arriving. She did not look dangerous. She looked exhausted. Her oversized gray sweatshirt hung loosely around her shoulders, sleeves slightly worn near the wrists. Her hair remained wrapped in a satin scarf she clearly had not expected strangers to see her wearing before sunrise. Behind her, the smell of coffee and cinnamon oatmeal drifted faintly through the apartment doorway, warm against the cold tension outside. It looked like every hardworking home Tyler had ever known growing up. Reeves adjusted the radio clipped near his shoulder. "Miss Carter, this can end peacefully if you cooperate." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Peacefully?" she repeated. "You arrived with armed officers before dawn, surrounded my building with flashing lights, and frightened my child over an unsigned administrative warrant. Her voice stayed controlled, but now there was steel beneath it. Do not confuse compliance with peace. Tyler swallowed again. The sentence hit harder than shouting would have. Reeves looked toward the body cam blinking on his chest, then toward the neighbors recording from every angle. The hallway had become a courtroom without anybody planning it. Every movement now carried witnesses. Every word lingered. Mia slowly stepped forward beside her mother, still holding the stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her small voice trembled slightly when she spoke. Are you taking my mom away? The question landed. Like a weight dropped into water. Deep. Sudden. Even Reeves blinked at that. Naomi immediately knelt beside her daughter, one hand gently smoothing the little girl's curls away from her forehead. Nobody is taking anybody, she whispered softly. Mia looked unconvinced. Then why are they here? Naomi opened her mouth, but for the first time that morning, no answer came immediately. Her eyes lowered briefly toward the floorboards beneath her feet. Tyler watched the hesitation on her face and saw something there that made his stomach tighten. Not fear for herself. Fear for what her daughter was learning right now. Reeves cleared his throat roughly. This is exactly why we need cooperation. Naomi looked back up slowly. Calm returned to her expression piece by piece like someone rebuilding a wall from the inside. No, she said quietly. This is why people need accountability. Downstairs, another neighbor stepped into the lobby holding a phone toward the stairwell. More voices echoed faintly from below now. More witnesses arriving. Reeves heard them gathering. Tyler heard it too. Then the younger officer finally spoke the sentence he had been trying to avoid saying since this began. Sir, I do not think we legally have enough to enter this apartment. And for the first time since arriving at the building, Daniel Reeves stopped looking at Naomi Carter and started looking worried. For a brief second, nobody in the hallway moved. The only sound came from rain tapping steadily against the stairwell windows, and the faint electric buzz of the overhead light flickering above Daniel Reeves's head. Tyler Brooks's words still hung in the air like smoke nobody knew how to clear away. Naomi Carter remained kneeling beside her daughter near the chained doorway, one arm wrapped protectively around Mia's shoulders. She could feel the little girl trembling slightly beneath her hand now, not crying anymore. Just scared in the quiet way children become scared when adults stop pretending everything is normal. Reeves slowly turned toward Tyler, disbelief sharpening every line in his face. Excuse me, he asked coldly. Tyler swallowed hard but did not back away this time. The warrant is administrative, sir. It does not authorize forced entry. His voice sounded steadier now, almost surprising even himself. Reeves stared at him for several long seconds beneath the pulsing red and blue hallway lights. Around them, phones continued recording from every angle. A livestream comment notification chimed somewhere near the stairwell. Then another. And another. Naomi noticed one teenager glance down at his screen with wide eyes before whispering toward a friend. There are like 30,000 people watching now. Reeves heard that too. His jaw tightened visibly. The hallway no longer belonged to him. Every second this continued. His authority weakened while Naomi's calm only grew stronger. He turned back toward her sharply. You think standing behind legal language changes reality? Naomi rose slowly to her feet again, keeping Mia close beside her. No, she answered softly. I think following the law matters, especially when people with power forget they are supposed to. Mrs. Evelyn Ross nodded immediately from halfway down the hall. Amen to that. A few neighbors murmured agreement under their breath. Reeves looked toward them with irritation flashing briefly across his face before disappearing again beneath trained professionalism. But Naomi saw it. Tyler saw it too. The older officer's composure was beginning to crack around the edges. Reeves adjusted the radio near his shoulder again. Central, he said firmly into the mic. We may have interference from residents obstructing the investigation. Naomi let out a slow breath through her nose. Residents documenting public conduct are not obstruction. Reeves ignored her, requesting additional support. The hallway reacted instantly. Nervous whispers spread between apartment doors. Mia gripped Naomi's hand harder. Tyler looked alarmed now. Sir, with respect, escalation is not necessary. Reeves rounded on him immediately. You are out of line, Agent Brooks. Tyler's face flushed slightly, but he held his ground. "No, sir," he said quietly. "I think we already crossed that line." Silence swallowed the hallway again. Naomi felt something shift then. Not victory. Not safety either. Something more fragile. Momentum. Reeves realized it too. That was the dangerous part. He stepped closer toward the chain door, lowering his voice enough that only Naomi and Tyler could hear clearly. "You are turning this into something bigger than it needs to be." Naomi looked directly into his eyes. Calm. Unshaken. "You arrived here with federal vehicles before sunrise over paperwork you knew could not authorize entry." She paused briefly. It was already big. The blinking red light on Reeves's body cam reflected faintly in Naomi's eyes. Tyler looked between them uneasily. Downstairs, more voices echoed through the lobby now. Residents gathering. Watching. Recording. Reeves glanced toward the stairwell as if calculating how fast the situation was slipping beyond his control. Then Mia suddenly tugged lightly on Naomi's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered nervously. "Why does he keep looking at you like that?" Naomi looked down at her daughter carefully. For the first time all morning, exhaustion showed openly in her face. "Because," she answered quietly, "some people are not used to hearing the word no from someone they already decided was powerless." Tyler lowered his eyes at that. Reeves did not move. Rainwater still dripped slowly from his jacket onto the hallway carpet, while dozens of phones continued capturing every second in cold glowing rectangles. Then the radio on Reeves's shoulder suddenly crackled to life. "Supervisor requesting immediate update," a voice said sharply through static. And for the first time since arriving at the building, Daniel Reeves did not answer right away. The static from Daniel Reeves's shoulder radio crackled again. Louder this time, sharp enough to slice through the silence hanging over the hallway. "Supervisor requesting status update immediately," the voice repeated. Reeves pressed the transmit button but hesitated for half a second before speaking, and that hesitation did not go unnoticed. Naomi Carter saw it. Tyler Brooks saw it. So did every neighbor standing behind half-open apartment doors with glowing phones raised chest high. Reeves finally answered in a clipped voice. "Situation is contained." The teenager near the stairwell muttered under his breath. "That is not what this looks like online." A few people nearby exchanged uneasy glances. Naomi remained standing in the doorway with Mia tucked close against her side. Her daughter's small fingers still clung tightly to the fabric of Naomi's sweatshirt, like letting go might somehow make everything worse. The apartment behind them felt smaller now. Warmer too. The scent of oatmeal and coffee drifted softly through the narrow opening in the chain door while cold rain air rolled through the hallway outside. Two completely different worlds divided by 3 inches of space and a brass chain lock. Reeves lowered his radio slowly and stared at Naomi with growing frustration. "You are encouraging disorder." Naomi blinked once. "No," she answered calmly. "People are witnessing consequences." Tyler shifted his weight uneasily beside him. Water dripped from the edge of his sleeve onto the carpet below in soft, uneven taps. "Sir," he said carefully, "we should probably de-escalate." Reeves did not even look at him. "You are forgetting your role, Agent Brooks." "No," Tyler replied quietly. "I am remembering it." The hallway fell silent again. Even the neighbors seemed surprised he said it out loud. Naomi noticed the slight tremor in Tyler's voice despite his attempt to hide it. He was scared. Not of her. Of what standing against his own supervisor might cost him. Reeves took one slow step closer toward the doorway. Not enough to cross the threshold. Just enough to make the hallway tighten around him again. "Miss Carter," he said firmly, "you are creating unnecessary tension in front of your child." Naomi looked at him for several long seconds before speaking. "My child did not wake up federal officers before sunrise." The sentence landed with the quiet force of truth nobody could argue against. Mrs. Evelyn Ross lowered her phone slightly and whispered, "Lord have mercy." Reeves's expression hardened. "You think being articulate changes the facts?" Naomi's eyes never left his. "I think you assumed I would not be." Tyler looked downward immediately at that. Reeves opened his mouth to respond, then stopped when another phone notification echoed through the hallway. Somebody downstairs suddenly called upward from the lobby. "News stations are picking this up now." A wave of murmuring spread instantly between residents. Naomi saw Reeves's posture stiffen almost imperceptibly. Control was slipping faster now. The flashing red and blue lights outside no longer looked intimidating. They looked exposed. Mia tugged gently on Naomi's sleeve again. "Mom," she whispered carefully. "Are they mad because you know the rules?" Naomi looked down at her daughter, and something painful softened across her face. "Sometimes," she answered quietly, "people become uncomfortable when the person they expected to stay quiet starts speaking clearly." Tyler exhaled slowly through his nose like the words hit somewhere personal. Reeves rubbed one gloved hand briefly across his jaw before speaking into the radio again. "We may require legal review on site." The voice on the other end answered instantly this time. "Negative. Hold position. Do not escalate further." The hallway heard every word through the speaker static. Reeves's face darkened slightly. Naomi noticed his grip tightening near the radio clipped to his vest. Then, from somewhere farther down the hallway, an older man stepped partially out of his apartment holding a tablet and shaking hands. "Officer," he said cautiously, "there are over 100,000 people watching this live stream right now." Nobody spoke after that. Not immediately. The only sound came from rain striking the stairwell windows and the soft mechanical blink of bodycam lights reflecting against wet hallway walls. Then Tyler Brooks finally looked directly at Naomi Carter and quietly asked the question nobody else there expected. "How did you know the warrant was invalid so fast?" The question lingered in the hallway longer than anyone expected. Tyler Brooks stood beneath the flickering overhead light with rainwater darkening the shoulders of his jacket, while dozens of phones remained pointed toward the apartment doorway. Naomi Carter looked at him quietly for a moment, almost as if deciding whether answering honestly would change anything at all. The smell of coffee drifting from inside her apartment had gone colder now, faint beneath the sharp scent of wet concrete and damp uniforms filling the hall. Mia leaned sleepily against Naomi's side, exhaustion beginning to replace fear in her small face after nearly an hour of tension she was too young to fully understand. Daniel Reeves folded his arms tightly across his chest. "You do not need to answer that." Naomi finally looked at him. "Actually," she said softly, "I think I do." The hallway fell still again. Even the livestream viewers seemed somehow present in the silence hanging between them. Naomi rested one hand gently on Mia's shoulder before speaking. "Before my daughter was born, I worked for a non-profit legal clinic downtown." Tyler's brows pulled together slightly. Reeves's expression remained unreadable. "We helped immigrant families understand housing notices, work permits, deportation paperwork, custody filings. Mostly people nobody else had patience for." Naomi paused briefly, eyes lowering for just a second like memory itself carried weight. "I spent 4 years reviewing warrants exactly like yours." A quiet murmur spread through the hallway immediately. Mrs. Evelyn Ross blinked hard. The teenager near the stairwell whispered, "I knew it." Tyler stared at Naomi differently now, pieces finally clicking together in his head. Reeves spoke before anyone else could. "That still does not authorize you to interfere with federal procedure." Naomi met his gaze calmly. "Understanding the law is not interference." The blinking bodycam light on Reeves's chest reflected across the brass chain lock between them. Tyler looked toward the folded warrant again, then back toward Naomi. "You said it was administrative the moment you saw it." Naomi nodded slightly. "Because judicial warrants are signed by judges and specify forced entry authority. Yours did neither." Tyler's throat moved as he swallowed. Reeves remained perfectly still, but tension pulled visibly through his jaw now. Naomi continued speaking softly, though every word carried through the hallway with painful clarity. "Most people panic when officers arrive at their door before sunrise." She glanced briefly toward Mia beside her. "That panic is usually what some agencies count on." Reeves's eyes narrowed immediately. "Careful." Naomi did not react to the warning. "No," she answered quietly. "Careful would have been reviewing your paperwork before frightening a child in front of half the city." Downstairs, voices echoed again from the lobby. More residents gathering. Somebody shouted upward that local reporters were outside the building now. Reeves heard it and looked briefly toward the stairwell with frustration flickering openly across his face for the first time. Tyler noticed too. The situation was no longer a quiet enforcement visit. It had become something else entirely. Something public. Something permanent. Mia looked up at Naomi carefully. "Mom," she whispered. "Did you used to help people like us?" Naomi's expression softened immediately. She crouched slightly beside her daughter and brushed her fingers gently across the little girl's cheek. "I helped people who were scared," she answered softly. Mia thought about that for a second before asking the question that made the hallway go silent all over again. "Then why are they treating you like the bad guy?" Naomi opened her mouth but stopped. For the first time all morning, real hurt crossed her face before she hid it again beneath calm. Tyler looked away awkwardly, unable to meet the child's eyes. Reeves stared at the apartment floor in silence. Finally Naomi answered in a quiet voice barely above a whisper. "Because sometimes when you teach people their rights, certain powerful people stop seeing you as helpful." Nobody moved after that. Rain continued sliding down the stairwell windows in silver streams, while the red and blue lights outside flashed rhythmically across the hallway walls like a heartbeat slowly losing control. Then Tyler Brooks did something nobody expected. He stepped beside Reeves, looked directly at Naomi Carter, and said softly enough that only the closest people heard it clearly, "I think you are right about the warrant." Daniel Reeves turned toward Tyler Brooks so slowly it almost looked controlled, but the tension gathering beneath his expression told a different story. The younger officer stood his ground beneath the flickering hallway light, rain still dripping from the edge of his jacket onto the stained carpet below. Naomi Carter watched both men carefully from behind the chained apartment door while Mia leaned quietly against her side, exhausted eyes half hidden behind loose curls. Around them, the apartment building had become eerily still. Nobody whispered anymore. Nobody shuffled behind doors. Every resident listening in the hallway understood they were watching something shift in real time. Reeves lowered his voice. "Agent Brooks, step aside." Tyler hesitated. Then he did something even more dangerous than disagreeing. He shook his head once. Small. Nervous. But clear. Reeves stared at him in disbelief. "You are jeopardizing federal procedure over a live-stream circus." Tyler glanced briefly toward the glowing phones aimed at them from the hallway and stairwell before answering carefully. "No, sir. I think the procedure jeopardized itself." The sentence landed hard. Naomi saw Mrs. Evelyn Ross press a trembling hand against her chest farther down the hallway like she could barely believe what she was hearing. Reeves looked toward the residents recording every second of this, then toward the stairwell windows flashing red and blue from the vehicles outside. The authority he walked in with now looked thinner somehow, stretched tight beneath too many witnesses. His shoulder radio crackled again. "Reeves, status update now." This time the supervisor's voice sounded sharper. Impatient. Reeves pressed the button immediately. "Encounter delayed due to civilian interference and misinformation." Naomi exhaled softly through her nose. "Misinformation," she repeated quietly. Reeves ignored her. "Subject is refusing cooperation." Tyler looked stunned. "She is exercising her rights." Reeves snapped toward him instantly. "Enough." The single word echoed sharply through the hallway. Mia flinched slightly beside Naomi. Naomi immediately wrapped one arm gently around her daughter's shoulders, rubbing slow circles against her back until the little girl relaxed again. Tyler noticed that. So did Reeves. For one brief second, guilt flickered somewhere behind the older officer's eyes before disappearing beneath irritation and pride. Naomi spoke before silence could settle again. "You know what bothers you most about this?" Reeves looked at her coldly. "You assume you know me." "No," Naomi answered softly. "I recognize the pattern." The hallway remained completely still as she continued. "You expected fear. Confusion. Maybe tears." She glanced briefly toward the warrant hidden inside Reeves's jacket. "You did not expect somebody to understand the law better than the people using it against her." Tyler lowered his eyes again. Reeves's jaw tightened visibly. Downstairs, a loud knock suddenly echoed through the lobby entrance, followed by muffled voices calling for access to the building. Reporters. More cameras. More witnesses arriving by the minute. One resident near the stairwell whispered nervously, "This is going national." Reeves heard it. Naomi saw something flicker across his face then. Not anger this time. Calculation. He was realizing the story was no longer about immigration enforcement. It was becoming about him. Mia looked upward at the adults surrounding her with growing confusion. "Why are there reporters now?" she asked quietly. Naomi smoothed her daughter's curls gently away from her face. "Because people pay attention when something unfair gets caught on camera." The little girl thought about that carefully before asking another question that froze the hallway all over again. "If they know it is unfair, why are they still standing here?" Nobody answered immediately. Not Tyler. Not Reeves. Not even the neighbors recording from every floor. Rain streaked slowly down the stairwell glass while the flashing emergency lights outside painted shifting red and blue shadows across the hallway walls like bruises fading in reverse. Finally, Tyler Brooks looked directly at Mia and spoke in a voice quieter than before. "Sometimes adults have a hard time admitting they made a mistake." Reeves closed his eyes briefly at that, almost imperceptibly, but Naomi caught it. The supervisor's voice exploded through the radio again. "Reeves, terminate contact if legal standing is compromised." Silence swallowed the hallway. Then Daniel Reeves slowly reached for the body cam attached to his chest. Daniel Reeves's hand stopped halfway to the body cam clipped against his chest. The blinking red recording light reflected faintly across his wet glove, while the supervisor's order still crackled through the radio at his shoulder. "Terminate contact if legal standing is compromised." Nobody in the hallway breathed loudly enough to interrupt the silence that followed. Naomi Carter stood motionless behind the chained apartment door with Mia tucked close beside her, one protective hand resting gently against the little girl's shoulder. Tyler Brooks watched Reeves carefully now, no longer with nervous uncertainty, but with the uneasy expression of someone witnessing a line being crossed in slow motion. Rain hammered harder against the stairwell windows outside, and somewhere below in the lobby, reporters shouted questions toward residents crowding near the entrance doors. The apartment building no longer felt hidden from the world. It felt exposed. Reeves finally lowered his hand from the body cam. His jaw flexed once beneath the flashing red and blue reflections washing across the hallway walls. "Central," he said into the radio slowly. "We are assessing next steps." The supervisor's voice answered immediately. "That is not a suggestion, Reeves. Stand down." Tyler closed his eyes briefly, like hearing it aloud confirmed what he already feared. Naomi said nothing. She simply watched the older officer carefully, her calm somehow sharper than anger could have been. Reeves looked toward her again. "You think this makes you untouchable?" Naomi's expression did not change. "No," she answered softly. "I think cameras make people accountable." Downstairs, another wave of voices echoed upward from the lobby as reporters continued arriving outside in the rain. Phone screens glowed all across the hallway now. Livestream comments raced upward faster than anyone could read them. Somebody near the stairwell whispered that hashtags with Naomi's name were trending nationwide. Mrs. Evelyn Ross lowered her phone slightly and looked toward Naomi with quiet disbelief. "Baby," she murmured softly. "The whole country is watching this now." Mia looked up at her mother immediately. "The whole country?" Naomi forced the smallest smile for her daughter despite the exhaustion settling deeper beneath her eyes. "Maybe not the whole country," she whispered gently. The teenager recording near the railing shook his head quickly. "No, seriously. It is everywhere." Tyler looked toward Reeves carefully. "Sir, we should leave." Reeves remained completely still. Water dripped from his jacket cuffs onto the carpet in slow, uneven taps, while the body cam light continued blinking against his chest like a pulse refusing to steady. Naomi noticed his breathing had changed too. Slightly heavier now. Not fear exactly. Pressure. The kind that builds when authority realizes it no longer controls the story being told. Then Reeves finally spoke again, quieter this time. "You embarrass federal officers in front of millions of people." Naomi looked at him steadily. "No," she replied softly. "Your decisions did that." The sentence settled deep into the hallway silence. Tyler looked away immediately. Even the neighbor's recording seemed affected by it. Mia leaned sleepily against Naomi's side, her stuffed rabbit dangling loosely from one hand now as exhaustion overtook adrenaline. "Mom," she whispered carefully, "can we go back to breakfast now?" The innocence in her voice cracked something invisible inside the hallway. Mrs. Ross covered her mouth briefly with trembling fingers. Tyler stared down at the floor. Reeves looked toward the child for several seconds without speaking. Then Naomi gently brushed her daughter's curls away from her forehead. "Soon, baby," she whispered. "Very soon." The radio at Reeves's shoulder crackled violently again. Reeves responded immediately. This time the supervisor sounded furious. "Legal just reviewed the livestream. You were never authorized to proceed without judicial approval." Silence exploded across the hallway. Tyler's face went pale instantly. Naomi closed her eyes for one brief second, not in triumph but in exhaustion. Reeves did not move at all. The flashing lights outside painted cold colors across his face while dozens of phones captured every second of his silence. Then the supervisor's voice delivered one final sentence through the radio static. "Pull your team out of that building now." And standing beneath the blinking bodycam light with the entire country watching, Daniel Reeves finally understood there was no version of this story where he walked away looking powerful anymore. The hallway stayed frozen long after the supervisor's final order faded into static. "Pull your team out of that building now." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Rain streaked slowly down the stairwell windows while flashing emergency lights outside painted restless red and blue shadows across the apartment walls. Daniel Reeves stood beneath the flickering overhead light with his radio still raised near his shoulder, but something about him looked different now. Smaller somehow. Not physically. The authority he arrived wearing so confidently had cracked open in front of witnesses, cameras, and a frightened little girl asking questions nobody there could answer honestly. Tyler Brooks finally exhaled the breath he seemed to have been holding for the last hour. Naomi Carter remained behind the chain doorway with one arm wrapped around Mia. Her expression calm but drained now, exhaustion settling beneath her eyes like bruised shadows. The coffee inside the apartment had gone cold hours ago. The oatmeal sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Morning sunlight had begun creeping faintly through the stairwell windows behind the rain clouds, turning the darkness of dawn into dull gray daylight. Reeves lowered his radio slowly. For several seconds he said nothing at all. Then, without looking directly at Naomi, he spoke in a voice rougher than before. "Remove the perimeter." The other officers farther down the hallway exchanged uncertain glances before reaching for their radios. Outside, one by one, the flashing emergency lights stopped spinning. The apartment building immediately felt quieter without them, though the silence left behind somehow carried even more weight. Mrs. Evelyn Ross lowered her phone carefully and whispered under her breath, "About time." Tyler stepped back from the doorway slightly, relief visible across his face for the first time all morning. Naomi noticed it immediately. He had not wanted this to go further. Maybe he never did. Reeves finally looked directly at Naomi again. The anger that had sharpened his face earlier was fading now, replaced by something harder to hide. Shame. Not complete. Not clean. But there. "You could have handled this differently," he muttered quietly. Naomi stared at him for a long moment before answering. "So could you." The hallway absorbed the sentence in silence. No triumph. No cruelty. Just truth spoken softly enough to hurt more. Mia rubbed sleepily at one eye and leaned heavier against Naomi's side. "Mom," she whispered. "Are they leaving now?" Naomi looked down at her daughter, her voice instantly gentler. "Yes, baby." Mia glanced toward the officers still standing in the hallway. "Because they were wrong?" Nobody answered immediately. Reeves looked away first. Tyler lowered his eyes toward the carpet. Naomi brushed her fingers carefully through Mia's curls before speaking. "Because sometimes the truth takes longer for grown-ups to admit." The little girl nodded slowly like she was trying to understand a world becoming more complicated by the minute. Downstairs, reporters shouted questions from outside the building entrance, while residents whispered excitedly in the lobby. Phone screens throughout the hallway still glowed with live-stream comments racing upward faster than anyone could follow. Tyler checked his own phone briefly, then looked stunned. "It is over 2 million views now," he said quietly before catching himself. Reeves closed his eyes for one brief second at the number. Naomi noticed his shoulders sag slightly beneath the weight of it. Every choice made that morning now belonged permanently to the internet. To headlines. To strangers. To history. Reeves reached slowly toward the folded warrant inside his jacket and stared at it for a moment before crumpling it once in his fist. Not dramatically. Just tired. This was supposed to be routine, he muttered under his breath. Naomi looked at him carefully. That is the problem. Reeves glanced toward her again. What does that mean? Naomi's expression softened slightly, though sadness remained underneath it. It means too many people have experiences like this and nobody notices unless cameras are rolling. Tyler swallowed hard at that. The hallway fell quiet once more while rain continued tapping softly against the windows. Then Reeves finally stepped backward away from the apartment door for the first time since arriving. A small movement, but everybody watching understood what it meant. Retreat. Mia noticed too. She looked up at Naomi carefully and whispered, "Mom, you were not scared of them." Naomi looked down at her daughter and managed the faintest tired smile. "Oh, I was scared," she answered softly. "I just did not let fear make my decisions for me." And standing beneath the dying hallway lights with the entire country still watching through tiny glowing screens, Daniel Reeves realized the woman he came expecting to intimidate had ended up teaching everyone there what dignity actually looked like. The hallway slowly began breathing again after the officers started pulling back. Radios clicked softly. Heavy boots shifted against damp carpet. One by one, the federal agents near the stairwell turned away from the apartment doors and moved toward the exit, while the glow of phone screens followed them from every angle. The flashing emergency lights outside had stopped completely now, leaving only gray morning light filtering through rain-streaked windows. Without the spinning colors, the building suddenly looked ordinary again. Tired beige walls, old brass railings, water stains near the ceiling. The kind of place most powerful people never noticed unless they came looking for someone to blame. Naomi Carter finally loosened her grip on the doorframe slightly as tension drained from her shoulders in slow invisible waves. Mia leaned sleepily against her side, the stuffed rabbit hanging from one small hand while her eyelids fought to stay open. Tyler Brooks stepped farther back down the hallway, removing his gloves quietly like he suddenly felt uncomfortable wearing them. Daniel Reeves remained where he was for another few seconds, staring at the apartment doorway in silence. The folded warrant still rested crushed inside his fist. Naomi noticed the way he avoided looking. Directly at the neighbors recording him now. The same hallway he entered expecting obedience had become a mirror reflecting every decision back at him. Mrs. Evelyn Ross finally stepped closer toward Naomi's apartment with careful slow steps. "Baby," she whispered softly. "You all right?" Naomi nodded once, though exhaustion weighed visibly across her face now. "I will be." Mrs. Ross glanced toward Mia and her expression softened immediately. Poor thing should have been eating breakfast instead of watching this mess. Mia looked up sleepily. "I still want pancakes." A few neighbors laughed quietly for the first time all morning. The sound felt strange in the hallway after so much tension but warm too. Human. Naomi brushed her fingers gently against Mia's curls. "You are definitely getting pancakes." Tyler looked toward them then, and something about the simple exchange seemed to hit him harder than the legal arguments had. He glanced down briefly before speaking. "Miss Carter." Naomi looked at him calmly. Tyler hesitated. Rain tapped softly against the windows behind him while reporters' voices echoed faintly from outside the building entrance downstairs. "I am sorry your daughter had to experience this." Naomi studied him for a second before answering. "Thank you for saying that." Reeves shifted uncomfortably beside him but remained silent. Tyler looked toward his supervisor briefly, then back toward Naomi. "For what it is worth," he said quietly, "I do not think this should have happened." Naomi's expression softened slightly. "Then make sure you remember this feeling the next time somebody tells you to stop asking questions." Tyler swallowed hard and nodded once. The sentence settled deep into the hallway silence. Reeves finally stepped forward again, though without the force or confidence he carried earlier. His wet jacket creased heavily around the shoulders now, and the blinking body cam light against his chest seemed smaller somehow beneath the morning light creeping through the building. "Miss Carter," he said slowly, "there will likely be internal review after this." Naomi looked at him steadily. "There should be." Reeves's jaw tightened faintly but he did not argue. For the first time all morning, he looked less like an officer and more like a tired man standing inside consequences he could no longer control. Mia tugged lightly on Naomi's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "does this mean they know you are not bad?" Naomi knelt carefully beside her daughter and held her small hands gently between her own. "Baby," she said softly, "being good and being treated fairly are not always the same thing." The hallway went silent again after that. Even the reporters shouting outside seemed distant for a moment. Tyler lowered his eyes toward the floor. Mrs. Ross wiped quietly beneath one eye. Reeves stared at the crushed warrant still clenched in his fist like he wished he could rewind the entire morning. Naomi looked down at Mia and managed a small tired smile. "But today," she whispered gently, "people saw the truth anyway." And standing there in the soft gray light of early morning while rain continued falling beyond the stairwell windows, the apartment building no longer felt like a place under siege. It felt like a place that had witnessed something important survive. The hallway slowly emptied after the officers finally turned toward the stairwell. Heavy boots echoed softer now against damp concrete steps while radios murmured low static in the distance. Daniel Reeves walked last. Not because he wanted to, because every movement suddenly looked heavier on him than before. The crushed warrant still rested in his hand as he descended one step at a time beneath the dull gray morning light filtering through the windows. Tyler Brooks paused halfway down the stairwell and glanced back once toward Naomi Carter's apartment before following the others downstairs. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. The tension that had filled the building before sunrise had burned itself out, leaving behind only exhaustion, rain, and the strange quiet that follows something people know they will remember for a long time. Naomi remained standing just inside the chain doorway for several seconds after the officers disappeared from view. Mia leaned sleepily against her side while neighbors slowly lowered their phones one by one. Mrs. Evelyn Ross stepped forward first and wrapped her robe tighter around herself. "You handled yourself with grace, baby," she whispered softly. Naomi smiled faintly, though her eyes looked tired enough to close where she stood. "I was mostly trying not to fall apart." Mrs. Ross shook her head gently. "No, you were trying to protect your little girl." The words settled warmly into the hallway. Naomi looked down at Mia, whose eyes were barely staying open now beneath heavy lashes. The stuffed rabbit still dangled from her hand by one bent ear. "Come on," Naomi whispered gently. "Let us finally make those pancakes." Mia nodded sleepily. "With chocolate chips." Naomi managed a small laugh for the first time all morning. "Soft, real, extra chocolate chips." A few neighbors smiled quietly as Naomi finally unlatched the chain and opened the apartment door fully. Warm air drifted into the hallway carrying the scent of cinnamon oatmeal, coffee, and the faint sweetness of vanilla candle wax burned down low on the kitchen counter overnight. Ordinary smells. Safe smells. Naomi paused before stepping inside and looked once more down the now quiet hallway. The flashing lights were gone. The officers were gone. But the feeling left behind still lingered in the walls. Not fear anymore. Something else. Witness. Downstairs, reporters continued shouting questions outside the building entrance while rain tapped softly against umbrellas and camera vans lined the curb. Naomi could hear faint pieces of it drifting upward through the stairwell. Her name. The livestream. Federal Review. Civil rights attorneys already commenting online. But standing there beside her daughter, none of that felt as important as the silence inside the apartment waiting for them. Peaceful silence. Earned silence. Mia tugged lightly on her hand. "Mom." Naomi looked down immediately. "Yeah, baby." Mia frowned thoughtfully. "Are people always going to look at us like that?" The question stopped Naomi cold for a moment. She looked at her daughter carefully, seeing confusion mixed with innocence in a face still too young to fully understand what had happened that morning. Naomi knelt slowly beside her. Outside the windows, the rain had finally begun easing into a soft mist, and pale sunlight pushed weakly through the clouds for the first time all day. "Some people might," Naomi answered quietly. "But listen to me." She gently tucked a loose curl behind Mia's ear. "The way people see you does not decide your worth." Mia stared at her seriously, absorbing every word. Naomi smiled faintly despite the exhaustion in her bones. "You walk into every room knowing who you are anyway." Mia nodded slowly. Then, after thinking for another second, she asked, "Even when people try to scare you?" Naomi glanced toward the open hallway behind them where fear had stood all morning wearing authority and flashing lights. Then she looked back at her daughter and answered softly, "Especially then." The apartment door closed gently behind them with a quiet click. Outside, the last drops of rain slid from the stairwell windows while morning light spread slowly across the building walls. Down on the street, cameras continued searching for headlines and officials searched for explanations. But inside apartment 4B, Naomi Carter stood barefoot in her tiny kitchen making pancakes for her little girl while the coffee reheated on the stove. And somewhere far beyond the city, millions of strangers who watched her refuse to surrender her dignity that morning sat quietly with the uncomfortable realization that courage does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a tired black mother standing calmly behind a chained apartment door, teaching her daughter not to mistake power for truth.